envy is wanting somebody else's life. You see they've got something better than you, and instead of rejoicing in the good they have, you weep over the fact that you don't have it. You're obsessed with, you focus on the fact that you don't have it. The envy is not just that. That wouldn't be good, but envy goes beyond that. In envy, we don't just want other people's lives, we resent their lives. We begrudge them their lives. In praise, you recognize people who are better than you, and you just rejoice in it. But in envy, you recognize people who are better than you or have it better than you, and you resent it. You're angry about it. You hate it. Envy is being unhappy at other people's happiness. Envy is weeping because people rejoice. Envy works in reverse. When the people that are above you fall down, you like it. Why should we deal with it? Why is it so serious? Because it hides itself. First of all, you got to deal with envy because it hides itself. You don't want to believe envy is true of you. There's nothing more humiliating than to have to admit to somebody that you're envious. And because it's so humiliating, we don't want to admit it's true. My heart was grieved, and that's how envy always postures itself. An aggrieved spirit over injustice. It's not fair. It's not fair. This isn't fair. Why do those people have this and this and this? It's just not fair. So you're aggrieved. You're not envious. You're just aggrieved over the injustice and the unfairness of life. But he knows better. Underneath, my spirit was also embittered. I wasn't just sad. I didn't just want other people's lives. I resented them for it. I begrudged their lives to them. And he came to realize, eventually, what we don't want to realize. Envy hides itself because it's so humiliating. Now, if that's the case, can you see envy in yourself? Well, here's the scary thing. Will you admit this about yourself? The people who you like, people who you admire, people who have a good reputation, people who have got a certain amount of influence, people who have got a pretty good reputation, people who have done well, people that you like, when they really screw up, when they really mess up, it's comforting. Isn't it comforting? It's not all that bad. It's not all that sad. You listen to it. You like to hear about it. You think about it. It's comfort because that's what envy is. It really sours your life. Secondly, you need to deal with envy because it sucks joy out of your life. Of all the things you can do, envy is the one thing that most can suck joy out of your life. It's a vacuum pump on joy. If you look carefully, you'll see an awful lot of the places where joy and happiness is draining out of your life. It's because of the holes that envy has stabbed in your soul. Why does it do that? Because, thirdly, envy poisons your ability to enjoy the life you've got. Nothing's good enough. Your job's not good enough, your body's not good enough, your life's not good enough, your friendship's not good enough, your marriage is not good enough, your love life is not good enough. Nothing's good enough. You're always finding fault. You're always critical. You can never just sit down and savor the moment. You can never just sit down and enjoy what's in front of you. There's always something wrong because you're comparing yourself to everyone else. Envy literally poisons us psychologically and socially. Do you not see it? Envy poisons and destroys your ability to appreciate your own body. We live in a culture that makes us envy the beautiful. It needs for us to envy the beautiful. It's a marketing strategy. It just bombards you with pictures of beauty so that when you look in a mirror, you can't enjoy what you see at all. They do that so that you'll buy all the various products and do all the various things, but it's pretty serious. There's a whole class of people, a whole class of fairly young people that utterly hate the way they look all the time, and you know, because some of you probably are like that. I have to say an awful lot of our personal problems is that we just are unwilling. We're just so twisted with envy over other people's lives. We want their life, his life, her life, that kind of person's life. I hate the life I've got. And of course, that's going to create all kinds of deep emotional problems. Never underestimate the spiritual power of envy. You know what happened? Adam and Eve, paradise. They got paradise and it wasn't good. Everything, perfect, eternal life, no disease, no hunger, beautiful paradise. Oh, one thing, you can't eat that tree. Don't touch that tree. Everything else is perfect. And it wasn't good enough. I mean, envy turned the Garden of Eden into the world. Because if you understand what you envy, you'll understand your own heart. Envy might be the greatest Rorschach test of all. Learn what you envy, and you will know who you are. Kierkegaard calls every human being to live before God. He calls every human being to build your identity on God. Center your life on God. Make God the main source of your happiness. Human beings are offended by this invitation because they don't want anyone superior to them. And so instead of living before God, we live before other things. We live before people's approval, or we live before money, or we live before career or achievement. We live before popular acclaim. In other words, we build our identity on other things. And he says, if you want to understand what it is you look to instead of God for your identity, figure out your envies. An admirer who feels he cannot be happy by surrendering himself becomes envious of that which he admires. Admiration is happy self-surrender. Envy is unhappy self-justification. You envy people who have the thing that you use to justify yourself. And because everybody does not really wholly live before God, but is always looking to something else for self-justification, we're all filled with envy. We're all fighting envy. And we're all, therefore, drained of joy. Where do we take envy? Where do we take our envy so that it doesn't strangle us? Proverbs 23, verses 17 and 18. Do not let your heart envy sinners, but look up, look ahead. Take your envy up into the fear of the Lord. Take your envy ahead into the future hope that is guaranteed to you as a believer. If you want to deal with envy, you've got to take yourself up into an experience of the unenviousness of God. And then secondly, you've got to take your heart and look at the hope of what's going to come for you in the future that is the final destruction of all envy. But when the Bible talks about the fear of the Lord, it's not talking about being scared of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is awe and wonder before the magnificence and for the beauty of God. The solution to envy is not just know this and know that, experience. The solution for envy is worship. In Psalm 63, David says, I have seen you in the sanctuary. I have beheld your power and your glory. Because your steadfast love is better than life. I will praise you as long as I live. My soul will be satisfied as with the richest of food. Here's what a sanctuary experience is. It's not just knowing God loves you. It's having a sense on the heart of God's love. I went into the sanctuary, says David, and I saw your love. I saw your love with the eyes of my soul. I tasted your love. It was like food, he says, on the palate of my soul. I felt your love. Now, what is he talking about? To not just know about God's love, but to see it, to sense it, to taste it in your soul. It's not just like listening to a great song. It's like getting inside the song. You just need to go to God and ask for it. You need to say, Lord, you have been at a concept up to now, but I'm never going to deal with my envy unless I actually experience your love. And not just your love in general. He had a realization of God's unmerited grace. He says, my heart was grieved, my spirit was embittered. I was senseless and ignorant. I was as a brute beast before you. But I am always before you. You hold me by my right hand. You guide me with your counsel. Afterward you will take me into glory. He realized he'd been foolish. He'd realized he'd been cruel to God. He'd been senseless. He'd been like a brute beast. He was embittered. He was terrible. And when he came to his senses, he saw that God had never let him go. That God was completely committed to him in spite of how he had lived. That God was completely dedicated to him in spite of how he'd lived. Unmerited grace. Because God was unenvious with him, he suddenly realized how stupid his own envy had been against other people. So when he started to experience the grace of God and began to experience the love of God, it began to give him freedom from his envy. Jesus Christ came to earth to pay the debt that deep in our heart we all know we owe for all the wrongs we have done. And because God would not take two payments for the same debt, it means since he's paid the debt, that no matter how you live, no matter what you've done, no matter what your record, no matter how much you failed, no matter how senseless you've been, embittered you've been, how much like a brute beast you've been, if you reach out a hand to the Father, you will find he always had you by the hand. Unconditionally. Why? We have the hand because Jesus lost the hand. We will never be forsaken because Jesus was forsaken. And when I see Jesus being the most unenvious person in history, he loves us. He delights in the differential between what we got and what he got. Jesus Christ, being the most unenvious person in the history of the human race. When you realize what he did for you, an experience of that will take away your envy. It will erode your envy. You've got to have it. Unless his love is a thing that you build your life on and that you live before, you're going to be eaten up by envy all of your life. But that's not all. You're not only supposed to take your envy up into the fear of the Lord, you're supposed to look ahead, take your envy ahead, and see your hope. Well, what is your hope? Well, listen, the death of Jesus tells me that God is unconditionally, graciously committed to us. But the resurrection of Jesus tells us that in the future we're going to have a new heaven and new earth. Now, why do you need that? To deal with the discontent of your heart. Here's why. Is there anything wrong with wanting a decent body? Is there anything wrong with wanting a good family? And if you just want these good things, how are you going to avoid envy when you see how incomplete your life is and how broken your life is? But if you know that what's coming is a complete fulfillment of your deepest desires beyond your wildest imagination, then and only then are you going to be able to live with the incompleteness of this world.